We all think of action movies as polished spectacles, each explosion timed perfectly, every fight flawlessly choreographed. But the reality behind the scenes is often far messier. Many of the films we celebrate today were once in chaos, teetering on the edge of disaster. The cameras may have stopped rolling, but the story was far from finished. In post-production, raw footage is reimagined, scenes are cut and rearranged, sound is reshaped, and sometimes entire endings are reinvented. What seemed irredeemable on set can emerge as cinematic gold once the editing suite takes over. Some of the most iconic action movies almost never resonated with audiences. Early cuts featured incoherent pacing, uneven tone, or sequences that simply didn't land. In countless instances, the magic that turned them into hits happened in silence, away from the eyes of directors, actors, and the public. Post-production doesn't just fix mistakes, it creates opportunities. Slow motion, color grading, sound design, and judicious editing can transform dull scenes into tense sequences and messy fights into iconic choreography. Even moments that seemed destined for failure can become legendary with the right touch. This countdown isn't about perfect filming or unflawed performances. It's about survival. It's about the invisible work that can take near disaster and turn it into a story that captivates millions. So, if you've ever wondered what separates the action movies that flop from the ones that endure, you're about to see the unseen force behind some of Hollywood's most remarkable rescues. Let's dive into 15 action movies that were saved in post-production, and explore how editing, sound, and careful pacing turned troubled projects into classics we still celebrate today. Fact 1. Equilibrium. Equilibrium started as a low-budget sci-fi action project with innovative ideas, yet the raw footage appeared awkward, especially the gun-kata sequences. Editors transformed the material, slicing action into precise beats, adding slow-motion layers, and synchronizing electronic music to every movement. Sound design emphasized each gunshot and reaction, creating rhythm and intensity beyond the limitations of the shoot. The final product was a stylish and engaging action film. Equilibrium demonstrates how meticulous post-production can elevate conceptually strong but raw footage into a visually striking cinematic experience. Fact 2. Die Another Day faced challenges from over-the-top effects and extravagant set pieces, including invisible cars and ice palaces. Early cuts risked making the film feel absurd and disconnected. Post-production refined the spectacle. CGI flaws were corrected, pacing was tightened, and climactic sequences were re-edited to build tension. Sound effects and music cues were strategically aligned to enhance drama and excitement. The final release maintained the James Bond style while correcting narrative and visual inconsistencies, illustrating how post-production can rescue even the most ambitious projects from potential ridicule. Fact 3. Demolition Man. Demolition Man struggled with tone during production, oscillating between satirical comedy and hard-edged action. Early cuts were chaotic and uneven, leaving test audiences unsure of how to respond. In post-production, editors leaned into the dual nature of the film. Action sequences were sharpened, dialogue and comedic beats timed for maximum effect, and futuristic visuals were highlighted. Sound design emphasized the contrasts, turning scenes of violence and absurdity into a cohesive, engaging rhythm. The resulting film balanced satire with spectacle, proving that even a tonally confused project can be transformed into a memorable cinematic experience through careful editing. Fact 4. Street Fighter. Street Fighter faced numerous challenges on set. Inconsistent performances, limited coverage, and tonal confusion threatened the film's coherence. Post-production turned these weaknesses into opportunities. Editors highlighted Raul Julia's commanding presence, trimmed weaker dialogue and takes, and restructured action sequences for better pacing. Sound effects and music were layered to create rhythm and excitement, turning chaotic footage into a more engaging experience. While still campy, the final film was watchable and entertaining. Editing salvaged the production, illustrating the power of post-production to create cohesion from a troubled shoot. Fact 5. Mission: Impossible 2. John Woo's sequel initially ran over 3 hours with sprawling sequences and uneven pacing. Scenes lingered without building tension, and subplots diluted the narrative. Editors intervened to streamline the story. Slow-motion action was accentuated, key sequences stylized, and the musical score synchronized to heighten intensity. Subplots were trimmed, maintaining narrative focus while amplifying drama and excitement. The final cut showcased Woo's signature action style, balancing spectacle with momentum. Mission: Impossible 2 demonstrates how careful editing can transform a sprawling, chaotic shoot into a visually commanding cinematic experience. Fact 6. Blade. Blade was poised to be a groundbreaking superhero film, but its original final battle with Deacon Frost looked unconvincing due to CGI limitations. Early test screenings were underwhelming, casting doubt on the film's potential success. Post-production reshaped the climax entirely. Editors emphasized physical stunts, layered sound effects for intensity, and timed music to enhance suspense. The final duel gained clarity, drama, and cinematic flair. Blade's tone shifted from a CGI-heavy spectacle to a stylish, dark, and compelling action experience. Thanks to meticulous editing and sound design, Blade became a cult classic, proving that post-production can define a film's ultimate impact. Fact 7. Tango, Cash. Tango and Cash suffered from a chaotic production. Directors changed mid-shoot, stunts were inconsistent, and the narrative lacked coherence. Even Stallone and Kurt Russell's chemistry seemed scattered on raw footage. Post-production reconstructed the story. Editors spliced dialogue from multiple takes, rearranged action sequences, and emphasized the lead's dynamic through pacing and selective cuts. Shootouts, prison sequences, and comedic beats were timed for clarity and impact. The final product, while over the top, appeared cohesive and entertaining. Editing salvaged a disjointed production, highlighting how the unseen work in the editing suite can create a surprisingly effective film. Fact 8. Edge of Tomorrow. Early cuts of Edge of Tomorrow struggled with repetition. Tom Cruise's repeated deaths and resets risked boring viewers, making the story confusing and the pacing flat. Editors approached the issue strategically. Loops were shortened, redundant dialogue removed, and visual cues emphasized progression. Music and sound effects were aligned with each iteration, turning repetition into narrative clarity and engagement. The final film became a tightly paced, entertaining time loop action story. The editing was crucial, converting potentially confusing material into a thrilling, readable, and clever cinematic experience. Fact 9. Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad was in turmoil even before the cameras stopped rolling. The original cut leaned dark, tense, and psychological, but the studio demanded a brighter, more accessible product. Post-production transformed the chaos into something watchable. Editors reordered sequences, trimmed dialogue, and emphasized humor. Color grading brightened visuals, while music and sound effects redefined tone. Scenes were stitched together to create energy, momentum, and spectacle. Though critics were unforgiving, audiences were drawn to the restructured chaos. Post-production saved the film from incoherence, demonstrating that editing can shape narrative, tone, and audience experience sometimes more than shooting itself. Fact 10. RoboCop. The first cut of RoboCop shocked studio executives. Excessive violence, a bleak tone, and controversial scenes led to an X-rating threat. The film risked being unreleasable in its original form. Post-production addressed both content and tone. Gore was carefully trimmed to meet standards, while satire and thematic clarity were enhanced. Sound design emphasized RoboCop's mechanical presence and the oppressive cityscape, while editing tightened pacing to balance action with commentary. The final release struck a unique balance between violence and satire. RoboCop became a cultural icon, demonstrating that editing decisions can define a film as much as on-set performance or direction. Fact 11. Escape from New York. The original opening of Escape from New York was long, convoluted, and slowed the narrative before Snake Plissken entered the story. It risked losing the audience's attention entirely. In post-production, Carpenter made decisive changes. Nearly 10 minutes of the original footage were removed. A concise title crawl and voiceover replaced the prologue, providing necessary context while maintaining tension. The minimalist synth score was emphasized, giving the dystopian Manhattan setting an immediate, haunting atmosphere. These adjustments transformed a potentially confusing start into a compelling introduction, allowing Snake Plissken's character to command the screen from the first moment. Post-production shaped the pacing and tone into what would become a classic opening sequence. Fact 12. The Long Kiss Goodnight. When filming wrapped, The Long Kiss Goodnight felt uneven. Early cuts revealed pacing problems, tonal inconsistencies, and sequences that failed to engage audiences. The studio questioned whether the film could succeed. Post-production became the turning point. Editors tightened action sequences, streamlined dialogue, and reshaped pacing for a steady rhythm. Sound design elevated the tension. Every gunshot, footstep, and ambient effect was calibrated for impact. Key chase scenes through snowy landscapes were cut for clarity and momentum, while character moments gained emotional resonance. The final product highlighted Geena Davis's transformation into a lethal yet relatable assassin. Though box office results were modest, the film's enduring cult status owes everything to the careful reconstruction and post-production. Fact 13. Hard Target. John Woo's first American feature presented unique challenges. Studio concerns about the foreign style and chaotic pacing left the original footage uneven and lacking cohesion. In post-production, editors restored Woo's vision. Slow-motion sequences were reinstated, key action beats emphasized, and a new score infused tension and rhythm. A standout moment, Van Damme kicking a flaming barrel, was elevated into a cinematic highlight through careful timing and layering. Even though the studio's influence remained, the final film carried Woo's signature style. Hard Target demonstrates how precise post-production can reclaim a director's intent, turning near failure into a compelling showcase of action mastery. Fact 14. Universal Soldier. Universal Soldier initially struggled with audience engagement. Test screenings highlighted pacing issues, tonal inconsistencies, and underwhelming energy. The studio feared the project could fail before it even reached theaters. Editors intervened decisively. Fight sequences were tightened, slow sections trimmed, and key confrontations were reconstructed for impact. The climactic battle between Jean-Claude Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren was carefully recut to maximize tension. Sound design was amplified, giving explosions and gunfire greater presence, while a synth-heavy score drove the rhythm of the action. Through these post-production choices, a film once perceived as flat gained energy and clarity. The audience experience was reshaped, proving that editing alone can turn a tentative shoot into a compelling, memorable action film. Fact 15. The Replacement Killers. Chow Yun-fat's Hollywood debut faced an unexpected hurdle. The footage felt fragmented, and early cuts made the film seem like two conflicting narratives forced together. The test audience response was lukewarm, and some feared the movie might never find its footing. Post-production became the lifeline. Editors stripped away unnecessary subplots, emphasized the central storyline, and reshaped the visual tone. High-contrast lighting, subtle desaturation, and carefully timed slow-motion sequences gave the streets a hypnotic, noir-like atmosphere. The musical score was reworked to enhance suspense and emotion, elevating otherwise ordinary scenes into cinematic moments of intensity. Though it didn't dominate the box office, the final cut became a cult favorite. Its survival wasn't dictated by the on-set performance or direction, but by the meticulous work in the editing room. The Replacement Killers is a prime example of how post-production can define a film's identity. Bonus fact: The 13th Warrior. Though not part of the main list, The 13th Warrior had one of the most remarkable post-production rescues in modern cinema. The film suffered from a bloated runtime, conflicting visions, and incoherent sequences that left early test screenings bewildered. Michael Crichton, the author of the original novel, stepped in to guide post-production. Entire scenes were restructured, some removed entirely, and the narrative reordered for clarity. Music and sound design were adjusted to create a more epic and immersive tone. Editors refined pacing and transitions, shaping a film that transformed chaos into coherence. The box office result was modest, but over time, The 13th Warrior gained a cult following. Its rescue highlights the transformative power of editing. Even troubled productions can be reborn through careful, creative post-production. Behind every explosion, stunt, and high-octane chase, it's often the unseen hands in the editing room that shape the film we ultimately experience. Post-production can redefine tone, pacing, and narrative, turning near failures into unforgettable cinematic moments. Which of these films surprised you the most with their post-production rescue? Were the transformations miraculous, or simply clever fixes? Share your thoughts. Sometimes the true hero of an action movie isn't on screen at all.